Overall, I had a science background, so I used to study biology at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So while I was working in the biology lab, I became increasingly interested and noticed the certain human elements involved in producing scientific knowledge. So, for example, the way of designing laboratory protocols, the way of interaction between mentors and students, the way of publishing data and evaluating data, etc., etc. So I became increasingly interested in these human elements in producing all kinds of scientific knowledge. And because my own cultural background, I originally came from China, so naturally I became interested from a sort of historical perspective that how the knowledge was produced in a totally different culture and social context, namely China in history. I work on a project, I work on history of medicine in general, but particularly I work on the use of poisons in Chinese medicine. I'm quite interested in this topic because I find whenever I talk to people about this subject, they often feel surprised that the use of poison in Chinese medicine is almost feel like counterintuitive, because I think the general audience impression is that there is this portrayal of Chinese medicine as mild and benign, especially in comparison to Western synthetic drugs, which are usually perceived as violent and with lots of side effects. But what is really interesting from my own discovery is that this is not the case. I find the use of poisons is really prevalent in Chinese medicine. And I really try to use this as an entrance to investigate not just the history of this ignored but very important history of Chinese medicine, but also try to relate that to certain experiences that we can share in general. For example, this paradoxical nature of drug therapy in general, which we see in contemporary pharmaceutical practice, as well as how a variety of drugs and things in general, perhaps, once they interact with the body, once they were used by different people, once they were put into practice in different contexts, their function changed. I was particularly attracted by the great diversity of the faculty's research in this department at Harvard. The diversity in terms of the focus on various time periods, as well as regions, and also disciplines, right, including history, of course, but also anthropology, sociology, etc., etc. So my thinking at the time was that although I work on East Asia in pre-modern period, I find it's quite important to communicate with the faculty members who specialize in other periods and regions. And in the past 6 years of study, I think I have benefited tremendously by interacting with these faculty members. Not just, in a way, deepened understanding of my project, but also really helped me to think about my project in a broader context, to make it more accessible and relevant to a broader audience, which I think is really one of the key the feature of this department.